All right, as they pass the baskets, we're going to jump into things today. We'll start a new series today. It's called Relationships Are Us. And yes, we shamelessly stole that from Toys R Us because, of course, Toys R Us is bankrupt now and they're closing down all their stores, and so they don't need the name anymore, right? So we're going to use it. And we're going to be talking about what the Bible has to say about relationships. Today is basically an introduction. In future weeks, we're going to get more specific, and we're going to be talking to married people, and to single people who want to get married. And we're going to be talking about sex and pornography. We're going to be talking about listening and communication and conflict, because the Bible has a lot to say about all of these issues. So let me start with a question. How would you fill in this blank? How would you complete this sentence? My highest goal in life is blank. How would you finish that sentence? What word would you use? My highest goal in life is success. My highest goal in life is comfort. Is it security, recognition, fun, approval? What is it for you? How you answer that question determines the direction of your life. For example, if my highest goal in life is fun, then when I get a couple invitations for things to do in the evening, I'm going to always choose the one that is more fun, right? If my highest goal is security, then I'm always going to make the choice that is the least risky and the most safe. If my highest goal is comfort, then I'm going to make the choice to do the thing that will, take the least effort. If my highest goal is to be recognized, then I'll tend to choose things where people will approve of me and notice me. But what does God say should be our highest goal in life? Well, of course, the Bible tells us what that is. 1 Corinthians 14, verse 1, it says, let love be your highest goal. Now, why love? Of all the things that God could have chosen to tell us to, hey, build your life on this, why did he choose love? 1 Corinthians 13 is the chapter on love in the Bible. This entire chapter is focused on one subject. It says we ought to make love the highest goal of our life. And the first few verses of this chapter give us 5 reasons why love is the most important value in life. So let's read through verses 1 to 8 here. It says, if I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Let's look at a few things we see from this passage. The first thing we see is that without love, all that I say is ineffective. If I speak in the tongue of men and angels, but do not have love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. Have you ever been listening to somebody and you are not hearing a word they're saying? It's like their words are going in the background, just on and on and on, but you're somewhere else. Hopefully that's not the way that you're listening to me right now. But I know that I have done that many, many times. And, I think you remember the Peanuts movies, with Charlie Brown. Have you ever noticed that they never ever show an adult in any of those movies? But when they want to show that there is an adult in the room, and when they're talking, you remember what it sounds like? They have this sound in the background. It's like, wow, 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 wow. Here's a little trivia for you. If you remember the movies, that's what it sounds like. Here's some trivia for you. When they made the first Peanuts movie, which was the Christmas special, it was back in like 1965 or something, they were trying to figure out how to show that an adult was there without actually showing the adult, because they never show any adults in the comic strips. And so they're trying to decide, what kind of sound should this adult have? And so they asked the music director, a guy named Vince Guaraldi, and he immediately said, oh, no problem. And he went and got a trombone player. And so all those wah-wah sounds in the movie, those are actually trombone, which I thought was really cool because I used to play the trombone when I was growing up. But the point here is that words without love are empty. They're just noise. They're like, somebody's talking, but all I'm hearing is wah, 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 wah. People tend to be impressed by great communicators who have lots of charisma and very influential. But God is not impressed. He says that words without love are nothing. They're ineffective. The Corinthian church that Paul's writing to here was proud of their spiritual eloquence. They said, we can speak in the tongues of men and of angels. They're so impressed with themselves. But God says, you're missing the point. Without love, it means nothing. Many of us here might say, well, I'm having a communication problem with my husband or my wife or my kids or my co-workers. Have you ever thought that maybe you're not connecting because you're not speaking in a loving way? You can say all the right words. You can use perfect logic in your arguments, but if you're not speaking in love, you're wasting your time. You might as well not be saying anything. Without love, all I say is ineffective. Number two, without love, all I know is incomplete. In verse 2 it says, if I have the gift of prophecy, if I can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, but do not have love, I have nothing. You can be smarter than Einstein. You can have so many degrees they call you Dr. Fahrenheit, and without love, it's all worthless. You can even be a brilliant Bible scholar, a walking Bible encyclopedia. You could memorize the whole New Testament, be able to argue doctrine with any theologian. God says it doesn't matter. If you don't have love, it's nothing. 1 Corinthians 8:1 says, knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. The world today is in a knowledge explosion. Our total knowledge is doubling every couple of years. New information and knowledge are expanding so rapidly, scientists can't even keep up with it. And as a result, we think we're pretty smart, right? Like this verse says, knowledge puffs up. That's a description of our society. We think we're so smart. Most people in our society think that we're smarter than God. Because God has all these old-fashioned ideas about morality and sex and integrity and all those things that were fine for people 50 years ago, but we're smarter than that today, right? And yet with all our knowledge, are any of the world's basic problems getting solved? No, not really. We've got more problems than we've ever had because the world is not looking for more knowledge. The world is looking for love. And that is in short supply. Without love, all I say is ineffective. All I know is incomplete. Number 3, all I believe is insufficient. The next verse says, if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I have nothing. It doesn't matter how much faith you have. It doesn't matter what you believe or how strongly you believe it. If you don't have love, it doesn't count. There's a common misconception that being a Christian just means believing certain truths or accepting certain doctrines. Somebody says, I'm a Christian because I believe in Jesus. Well, yeah, the devil believes in Jesus. The devil believes Jesus is the Son of God, but he's not a Christian. And so the real question is, do you love Jesus? And do you love other people in Jesus' name? The truth is that is what makes Christianity unique. Romans 5:8 says, but God demonstrated his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So it says God demonstrated his own love. Why did Christ die for us? To demonstrate God's love. Because love is the foundation of the Christian faith. Paul takes this even farther. He says in Galatians, the only thing that counts is faith expressing itself. How? Through love. Some of you might need to write that verse on your calendar when your schedule gets bogged down and you're trying to figure out what to prioritize because you need to cut something out. Remember this verse. The only thing that counts is faith expressed through love. Number 4, without love, all I give is insignificant. Verse 3 says, if I give all I possess to the poor, but do not have love, I gain nothing. It says you can give everything you've got, not just 10% as a tithe, but everything you've got, and still not have love. Now, giving with right motives is definitely an expression of love. But the problem is that people often give with wrong motives. Some people give for prestige or to get their name on a plaque. Some people give for power, to control people. You ever seen parents give their adult kids money to control them? Or you can give out of obligation or out of guilt. So just because you give doesn't mean you're doing it out of love. Man, you can buy your wife the biggest diamond ring in the world, but if you don't have love, it doesn't count. Parents, you can buy your kids amazing, you can buy them $150 Nikes that pump up 15 different ways, and if you don't love them, it's just hot air. My mother was born in Bloomington, Indiana in 1925. And about the time she was born, her dad made a wise investment. He bought a limestone quarry. And business took off, skyrocketed. He became rich even during the Depression years, supplying Indiana limestone all over the country. Buildings like the Empire State Building were built out of Indiana limestone. My mother grew up in a 3-story mansion with a ballroom on the 3rd floor. I remember visiting there as a kid, and I was so impressed, like this huge ballroom, part of the house. They had a maid and a cook, and she had about all the possessions that she could possibly want. Sounds like a great way to live, right? She was miserable. Her parents had no clue about how to show love. And so she had a miserable childhood. She spent literally decades dealing with the emotional consequences of not being loved. Just because you give things doesn't mean you're doing it in love. And if you don't give in love, it doesn't matter. Number 5, without love, all I accomplish is inadequate. Verse 3 says, if I was burned alive for preaching the gospel, but didn't love others, it would be of no value whatsoever. You say, I can rack up a list of achievements a mile long. I can succeed in all kinds of great accomplishments. I can even sacrifice my life for the greatest cause on earth, the kingdom of God, but without love, it doesn't matter. It's a waste. Last week I read a true story about a Christian who had a Muslim friend named Sahar. Sahar was attracted to parts of Christianity, but she couldn't accept the idea of God actually becoming a human being. She asked him, how can you believe that Jesus is God when he was born through the birth canal of a woman and he had to use the bathroom? I mean, aren't those kind of things beneath God? Her Christian friend asked her a question. Sahar, let's say that you were on your way to a critically important business dinner, and so you are dressed in your very best clothes, and you want to make an impression on this customer, and you're about to arrive just in time, and then you see your daughter drowning in a pool of mud. What would you do? Would you let her drown so you can go to your dinner looking dignified, or would you go into the mud and rescue her, but then arrive at the dinner covered in mud? Well, Sahar's response was, matter of fact, of course, for my daughter, I would jump into the mud and I'd save her. Well, okay. Well, say there were others with you who also saw her drowning in the mud. Would you send somebody else to rescue her, or would you do it yourself? And she responded, well, if she's my daughter, then how could I send anybody else? Nobody would care for her as much as I do, and I would go myself, definitely. And then her Christian friend said, okay, if you, being human, love your daughter so much that you're willing to lay aside your dignity to go into the mud and save her, how much more can we expect God, who loves us so much, who even created us, to lay aside his majesty, to come down into the mud and dirt of this world to save us? Well, after Sahara thought about this story for a while, and thought about how God had sacrificed for us because of his amazing love, it eventually won her over, and she became a follower of Christ. You see, Jesus sets the example for love. I mean, he helped his Father create the whole universe. He did amazing miracles, and none of it would have mattered without love. Without love, it would have meant nothing to us, because without love, all I accomplish is inadequate. I'm starting to see a theme here. The point of these first few verses is that relationships are the most important. They're far more important than accomplishments or anything else in life. Success without love is empty. One day, God is going to do an evaluation of your life. You're going to stand at the judgment throne. And when you stand before Him, He is not going to focus on your business success. He is not going to focus on your bank account or on your achievements. When God evaluates how He lived, He's going to look at your relationships. He's going to ask you, did you really love the people that I put around you in your life? How do I know that? Because Jesus told us the two greatest commandments were to love God and to love the people around us. And those two commandments sum up everything else in the Bible. And so God is saying, I can have the eloquence of an orator. I can have the knowledge of a genius. I can have the faith of a miracle worker. I can have the generosity of a philanthropist or the dedication of a martyr. But if I don't love, it doesn't count. What Paul is basically saying over and over is that life minus love equals zero. Love has to be our highest goal. Well, after Paul hammers this point home time after time in many different ways about the priority of love, he then talks about how to put it into practice. How do you put love into action? Colossians 3:14, it says, clothe yourself with love, which binds us all together in perfect harmony. Well, how do I do that? Well, first, we've got to define love, because the problem is that everybody uses this word, but few people know what it really means. You see, you hear the word constantly. We say, I love my wife. I love God. I love the Reds. I love pizza. I love America. I love my car. We throw the word around. We use it for everything. And in fact, we use it so much that it's become meaningless. I mean, I hope I love my wife in a different way than I love pepperoni pizza. But we use the same word. And so it's gotten kind of meaningless. The true definition of love comes right out of this chapter we're looking at today. It's an extremely practical definition, one that we can all start applying today. So let's look at verses 4 through 7. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. Love is not rude. It is not self-seeking. Love is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love rejoices in the truth. Love always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. Now, by that definition of love, how good a lover are you? When I use that definition, I am not a very good lover. I have got a lot to learn. I need to learn some lessons about how to love the people in my life. So this morning, I want to just cover 2 insights on the practice of love. We're going to go into this deeper next week. But 2 insights. Number 1, love is an action. It is not just something you feel. It's not something you say. Love is something you do. Notice all the action words listed in these verses. Love is patient, kind, rejoices in the truth, protects, trusts, perseveres, on and on and on. All actions. They're all things that you do. Love doesn't just talk. It's not just words. It's not just lip service. Love is action. It's a demonstration, not an inclination. One of my favorite authors is Tony Campolo. He writes about how he counsels people when they come to him for marriage counseling. And he says, when I'm talking to people who have lost all their affectionate feelings toward each other, they tell me that what they once felt has died, and they've got no other choice but divorce. He says, whenever I counsel people like that, he says, I always tell them the same thing. I tell them if they will do faithfully what I tell them to do, those feelings of love will come back within a month. He says, I simply tell them to do the following. Number 1, each day make a new list of 10 things that you would do for your spouse if you loved them. He says, I recognize you don't love them right now. Okay. If you did love them, a new list every day, 10 things you would do. Number 2, each day, do the 10 things. He says, you do that, I guarantee you, the feelings will come back within a month. You see, there's no secret formula or magic recipe, no mysterious process, no extensive research, showing all these complicated things. There's just the age-old truth that those who do loving things will feel loving feelings. Guaranteed, test it out if you don't believe me. Love is an action. The second insight is this: love is a choice. You choose to love or you choose not to love. There's a myth that many people believe that says that love is kind of uncontrollable. We use language like, I feel giddy, I'm in love. I feel like my head's spinning, I'm in love. I feel like I'm weak in the knees. It's more like you're seasick than love struck. But those are the kind of words that we use when we describe love, right? We all heard people say, I just fell in love. Love at first sight. I fell in love. And it's like you're walking down the street and fell in a pothole or something. I just fell in, couldn't help it. And there's a danger to this misconception that most of us don't realize. When you say, I fell in love, what you're really saying is, it wasn't my fault. It just happened. I just fell in love with you. And that doesn't sound so dangerous, but what's the end result of thinking like that? Later on in the relationship, what you hear is, I just fell out of love with you. Sorry, couldn't help it. It was my fault. It's not my control. I just fell out of love with you. How many times have you heard somebody say, I just don't love him anymore, or I don't love her anymore. I can't help it. It's not my fault. Here's the truth. You may not love him or her, but if so, it is because you chose not to. It is your choice. You choose to love or you choose not to love, because love is not just a feeling. Love is an action, and it is a choice. And actually, it's when you don't feel like it and you still act in a loving way, that is a greater expression of love by far than when you do feel like it. Real love is when you do the loving thing when you don't feel like it. Love is getting up in the middle of the night with a sick child when that's the last thing on earth you feel like doing. Love is being patient with your husband or wife when they come home from work after a stressful day and they're acting grumpy and like a jerk, and you're patient with them anyway, even though you don't feel like it. That's what love is. Love is giving a person what they need, not what they deserve. I'll never forget the time I was having dinner with a Vineyard pastor and his wife from another city. During the dinner, the wife told a story about something that happened at their church. They have a ministry of people with AIDS, and so when you have a ministry like that, of course you're going to run into some interesting people. And the lady that runs this ministry was named Sue, and Sue met a guy who was a cross-dresser. So in other words, he wore women's clothes all the time. And he completely rejected anything to do with Christianity, would not talk about Jesus, would not set foot near their church, or because of course he expected that his lifestyle would be rejected by Christians. Well, Sue found out that he was moving to a different apartment. And so she asked if people from the church could come and help him move. And at first he rejected that. He said, no, I have some friends coming to help me and we can handle it. But she sort of persuaded him. She said, well, if it's all right, we'll just come and help just in case you do need some help. So finally he said, okay. Well, Sue went and she recruited several young men from the church, but she prepared them in advance. She said, hey, you're going to see this guy in women's clothes, and you're going to be moving all these boxes of women's clothes, but I don't want you to make a single comment about them. Don't joke, don't laugh, or anything else. And so they showed up, and they helped him move, and it turned out that none of the guy's friends showed up. And so the people from the church were the only ones helping him move. And they were kind and considerate to him. They treated him with respect. And in fact, halfway through the move, he couldn't take it anymore. He turned his face to the wall and started crying. The next week, a man walked up to Sue at church and said hello. She didn't recognize him, but then she figured out it was the same guy, but in men's clothes. And he ended up giving his life to Christ. That's what love looks like. It's an action, and it's a choice. Love is giving a person what they need, not what they deserve. And when you love in spite of your feelings, when you love even when you don't feel like it, that's what I call loving by faith. Acting in a loving way, even when you don't feel like it. Because if you choose to act loving, then eventually the feelings will come. Now, there's one more reason that Paul says you need to make loving other people the number one objective of your life. What is that? It's because of the permanence of love. Paul says you need to make love your highest goal because it's the only thing that's going to last. In verse 7, he says, love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. Notice it says, never gives up. It's going to keep on going. It's eternal. It stays with you. Everything else in life is temporary, except love. Maybe you say, well, I live for fun. How long is fun going to last? I live for money. How long is money going to last? I live for pleasure, security, or approval of others. How long is any of that going to last? Nothing else that you could possibly base your life on is going to last. Nothing except for love, because love is permanent. It lasts for eternity. In verse 13, Paul talks about this. He says, 3 things will last forever: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. In John chapter 13, Jesus said, a new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this everyone will know that you're my disciples, if you love one another. Notice he says it's a new commandment. It's not a suggestion. It's not, maybe you want to think about this. No, it's a command. If you're a believer in Jesus Christ, it is not optional. It's your lifestyle. How are we commanded to love? Jesus says, as I have loved you. Jesus is our model. Now, some of you might say, well, Ken, that is impossible. How can I love like Jesus? He's God. He's perfect. I can't love like that. You're right. You can't. And that's why you need Jesus Christ in your life. You need his power to give you the power to love in a way that you can't on your own. You can't love like Jesus does. That's why you need God's power in your life. I'd like the worship band to come up for closing song. As they come up, if you truly want to make love your highest goal, it's going to require some action. It's going to require you to do some things different after you leave here today. So think about it. In your relationships right now, are there somewhere you need to seek some reconciliation with people that maybe you haven't been loving with? Maybe kids or a spouse or parents or people at work. If you're serious about making love your lifestyle and obeying this command, make it our highest goal, it's going to require some radical changes. You're going to have to put your love into action. And the first step, you start acting loving in the relationships you already have, the ones that are closest to you, the ones right at home. You can start today, right there. Let's stand together for prayer. Heavenly Father, your word is so clear on this, that we're to make love our highest goal. Would you help us to do it? You say it's the only thing that's going to last. Would you help us to remember that relationships are more important than accomplishments? Help us to understand how without love, all that we say is ineffective. All that we know is incomplete. All that we believe is insufficient. All we give is insignificant. All we accomplish is inadequate. Lord, would you help us to remember that love is an action and it's a choice. Would you help us to start making those choices today in every area of our life, with all our relationships, to love the people that you've put around us. Lord, would you help each person here to be more loving this week? We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Now is your fault, still you love Father.